Okay.
And I'll turn it over to you, Victor.
Did you have anything else you wanted to say or add?
I'll add a little bit at the end, but as Victor said, please jot down things about this topic that you'd like to explore in more detail, but please also be thinking about any topic that you would like the doctors Van Laar to follow up with. So thank you so much.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. So what I've ended up titling this talk today is Complementary, Alternative, and Integrative Medicine in Parkinson's Disease. Specifically, what are they? Do they work? So, again, can you get everyone to mute because we're getting a lot of background. I'm hearing myself a lot. All right, I think that's good. Okay, anyway. So what we're really going to be doing today is introducing a lot of vocabulary terms, because some people, and until I really started researching this, myself included, you hear these terms like alternative medicine, complementary medicine, CAM, integrative medicine, and you start thinking they're all the same thing, and they're really not. And so we're just going to spend some time defining some of these terms first, and then I'll just introduce a few of the more common ones that people run into, and then I'll turn it over for questions. But just to reiterate what we said, today's more of a general introduction. So not just if there's more specific treatments you want to hear about, whether they're alternative or whether they're conventional, whether they're Western medicine, whether they're new research that's out, let us know. If there are specific symptoms in PD you want to know more about, let us know. Send it to Casey, send it to everyone at the PFWPA team, and we will go from there. So let's start talking about today. So before we even get into what are these different medicines, let us start by defining what is a drug and what is a medicine. So when we say drug, put in your mind, well, what do you normally think of as drugs? And I'm sure the first thing that comes to mind are like the prescribed drugs you have to take on a daily basis, or ibuprofen that you buy over the counter. And those absolutely are drugs. But some things you may not think about as drugs are also drugs. For example, supplements and herbals and naturals. They can have an effect on the body, which makes them a drug. Some of our foods have drugs in them. Teas, coffees, sodas that have caffeine. Caffeine is a drug. It has a biological effect on our body. And of course, then you have the drugs, like cocaine and heroin and pot and so forth. So a drug is, by definition, any chemical not essential for life. So we're not talking about food. We're not talking about sugar. We're not talking about water. A drug is any chemical not essential for life that has a biological effect on the body, and that can have a physiological effect, like slowing your heart rate or your blood pressure. It can have a psychological effect, like antidepressants or anti-hallucinogenics. Or they can be things that are psychoactive, like certain herbal supplements and other drugs. So a drug isn't just medicine you get from your doctor or from the pharmacy. A drug is anything that you put in your body that isn't technically a food or a water that can have an effect on your well-being. Now, a medicine is by definition a drug, but a medicine is one that's used to diagnose, cure, or treat, or prevent a disease. So when we cross the threshold from drug to medicine, we're crossing the threshold from has an effect on the body to has an effect on the body that's specifically pointed at wellness of the body. So, example of medicine that's to diagnose. If you've ever had a TB test and they do the little injection in your arm and they look for the little red bump, that's a medicine because you're trying to diagnose whether you have tuberculosis. Cures or preventatives, treatments, things that you get from your doctor or your pharmacy. So like ibuprofen is a drug, but it is also a medicine. A vaccine is a drug, but it's also a medicine. So that's a very important distinction when it comes to the medical and the science field, is whether something's a drug or a medicine. And today we're going to be talking about medicines, things that are meant to help treat the body and provide the body wellness. So what are some of these alternative medicines we're talking about? So a lot of things get rolled into what is called CAM. There's a push by a larger especially private medical centers advertising that they have CAM therapies or CAM approaches. CAM is an acronym that stands for complementary and alternative medicine. So CAM is really meant to encompass a diverse, broad field of healthcare systems and practices. So the idea is you're not going in just to see your movement disorder specialist. You're going in to see somebody who can treat a movement disorder, plus if you're not sleeping well, plus if you have pain that may or may not be related to the disease that you went in for. But the thing with CAM is it tends to roll both conventional medicine in with alternative medicine. So what do we mean by complementary and alternative? And so when we say conventional, let's start there. When I say conventional, that's Western medicine. That's you go to your doctor, they diagnose you, you get a treatment. That's been approved by the FDA and you can get at your pharmacy. Complementary medicine, these are treatments that are used in conjunction with conventional medicine. So for example, we're going to give you this drug for a movement disorder, but also recommend you go do physical therapy. Physical therapy is obviously a tried and true evidence-based medicine treatment. It's not a medicine because it's not a drug, but it is a treatment that then can be used in combination. So this idea of complement the drug with some other treatment or therapy physically that can help out. Now, this is in direct contrast to alternative medicine. Alternative medicine, these are treatments that are used instead of standard care. So these are treatments that you don't necessarily get from your doctor, or there's something that hasn't been really approved for the thing you went in for to get treated. So that's what we mean by instead of the standard of medical care. And we'll get into a little bit more detail on that in a minute. And then there's integrative medicine, which is what CAM is. And CAM really is another word for integrative, complementary plus alternative medicine. And what integrative medicine means is a combination of medical care that integrates your conventional medicine. So you just go in, get a drug, get out, with CAM practices. So you have your conventional medicine plus your treatments that are in conjunction with conventional medicine, and you may even have treatments that are alternative medicine. And so in integrative clinics, wellness centers, they're practicing CAM and integrative medicine, trying to put all these different pieces together to treat the whole person. At least that's what they're aiming to do. So I just said treating the whole person. So that will bring up for some people, well, some people are advertising a holistic approach. Is that the same thing? Not quite. So yes, it is true. Holistic is like CAM and integrative medicine in that it's a form of healing that is meant to consider the whole person. It's meant to treat the whole body, the whole disease, or the whole host of diseases in the quest for the optimal health of the patient. And holistic approach sets itself apart from CAM and integrative medicine in that it's set on four very central pillars. You treat the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual of the body. So, physically, how are you feeling? Mentally, how are you feeling? Emotionally, how are you responding with the world? Spiritually, where does your, not necessarily spiritual in the religious sense, but just how is your faith in life? Like, how are you feeling about yourself and the world around you? and just trying to get all of those things to work together to provide a whole of wellness for a person. But the main thing about holistic doctors is they're trying to approach your disease, all these 4 pillars targeted at the underlying cause of your condition. So they are trying to treat the thing that is having the effect on all of these 4 pillars. Now, holistic doctors tend to be licensed doctors. These are doctors that you will find at a wellness center or integrative medicine center. And they will work with your existing doctors and care providers. And they do practice evidence-based medicine. So yes, they're trying to get at these 4 pillars, which may not sound like it's, your standard care, but they're trying to get at these things using standard care. And evidence-based medicine is the bedrock of what most would call Western medicine, that we have used science and experience to know that this standard of care works for the condition we're trying to treat. Now, in direct contrast to a holistic doctor, we have naturopaths. Naturopathic practitioners are a whole other host. Naturopathy is a medical system that has been evolved and modernized from traditional practices that arose in Europe, particularly in Germany, in the 1800s. So it became very in vogue during the 1800s in Northern Europe to try to approach things with traditional medicines, herbs, things that aren't considered standard of practice or even evidence-based medicine. And that kind of got ported over to the US with immigration, and then has really taken root here. Now, when you're talking about a naturopath, if you're going to go see a naturopath, the thing to keep in mind is that there's different kinds of naturopathic practitioners. So for example, there are naturopathic physicians, or they will sometimes call themselves naturopathic doctors. Now, naturopathic physicians have attended most of the time an accredited school where they earn a degree in naturopathy. They earn what is called an ND. Now, an ND is not the same as an MD. These are not medical doctors. Some states do require that they have a license and that they still try to meet the same credentials as medical doctors, but they don't have to have the same medical training. And unlike medical doctors, for example, Amber has her medical license in Pennsylvania, but she's still recognized as a doctor in all 50 states. Not true of NDs, because only certain states have licensing mechanisms for naturopaths, California being one of them. But just because you're an ND in California doesn't mean you're anything in Ohio. So in contrast to the naturopathic physicians, we have traditional naturopaths. These are people that practice the same medical system that was ported in the 1800s. They generally have not attended an accredited training, or they probably trained under another naturopath or just tried to learn themselves to peddle their wares. And in the third case, you have trained healthcare providers who have naturopathic training. So there are MDs, ODs, osteopathic doctors, PAs, and nurses that have also gone on to have naturopathic training. Oftentimes you will find these healthcare providers associated with wellness centers and clinics and integrative medicine clinics. But be sure you know who you're seeing and what their actual education and background is. The problem is there's a lot, as I mentioned at the talk last month, there are lots of wellness centers out there. That does not make them accredited wellness centers. So when I say, if you're going to a wellness center, I'm talking like the Cleveland Clinic Wellness Center or the Mayo Wellness Center. I'm not talking about, the Tennessee Wellness Center that tries to give everyone dialysis for every disease. Those can be a little sketchy. So, do your research, see who you're actually getting treatment from. So what really is the difference then between CAM, integrative medicine, holistic medicine, and natural alternative medicine? And the main difference between naturopathic and holistic practices are their approach. A naturopath uses natural, non-traditional remedies to enable the body to heal itself. The idea behind naturopathic remedies is that it is long-term. Like they very conveniently make it so that their treatments aren't meant to make you feel better next week. Their treatments are meant to make you feel better over the long term, which is very vaguely defined often. And many of their treatments are, as a result, considered alternative medicine because they do not meet current standard of care or evidence-based care. Holistic doctors and practitioners, on the other hand, use conventional medicine, evidence-based medicine, and they will use it in conjunction with other systems of medicine and care. So, for example, working with your care provider, working with a psychiatrist, working with a dietitian to help treat the whole patient. But again, they are using standard of care, evidence-based conventional medicine to attack the underlying problem. They're just doing it from all angles rather than just, oh, you have pain in your elbow, let's give you a steroid shot. The holistic doctor is going to be, oh, you have pain in your elbow, let's identify where that pain came from. We'll get you the shot so that you don't have pain now, but let's, make sure that you feel better after the shot. Let's make sure that you don't do whatever aggravated your elbow in the first place. Like they go at the problem from every angle and from every conceivable reason. So that's the main difference. So when we're talking alternative medicine, natural medicine versus CAM medicine, holistic medicine, those are the main, or I don't want to keep saying CAM because CAM is its own little thing. CAM is an integrative medicine. It is not integrative medicine because CAM is conventional and alternative. So you have naturopathic, which is generally alternative. You have holistic, which is conventional but integrative. And then you have CAM, which is both alternative and conventional, but integrative. So I'm sure at this point that's all clear as mud. I did not make a slide that points those three things out, so I apologize. I will add that to before I upload this for PFWPA to post. So the other thing to keep in mind when we're talking about alternative medicine and when we're talking about alternative medicine and specifically naturals and herbals, is that we have to keep in mind that these aren't approved medicines. That's why they're called alternatives. So these natural drugs, the supplements and the herbal remedies, don't have to follow the same strict rules that your prescription drugs do. Manufacturers do not have to prove that the drug is safe. They don't have to prove that it's effective. They don't even have to prove that it actually has what it says on the label, which is a real shame because there are some herbal and other supplements that can be beneficial when prepared right. But, I'm sorry, but if you're going to go into the GNC, you're probably like me and you're going to grab the cheapest bottle of St. John's wort. I hope it has St. John's wort in it. Otherwise, it's not going to do jack for your depression. And sadly, this is allowed. This is allowed under their classification as dietary supplements. Now, this has been a long point of contention within the government, trying to go back and forth to really nail down where regulation should be when it comes to putting things in bodies. And there's just a lot of lobbyists out there trying to keep dietary supplements out of the regulation. Now, that doesn't mean that if something goes wrong with a dietary supplement, the government is going to do anything. No, 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 no. If some new dietary supplement gets released and a whole bunch of people start having heart attacks, which has happened, yeah, now the FDA is going to step in. It's going to do its research and it's going to figure out what's wrong and then ban that and then get the that supplement banned. That absolutely does happen. But the problem is it doesn't happen up front. So these dietary supplements can be released to the public before there's any safety testing done. So the other thing is, since we don't really have a lot of these supplements characterized well, not only do we not know whether they're safe when they get introduced to the public, we don't know if there's going to be interactions with existing prescriptions or other healthcare issues. So this is a user beware risk that you have to keep in mind. And then there's this misconception. There's this misconception that something is safe because it's natural. And, the easy quip to that is, well, meteors are natural and they're not particularly safe if they hit you on the head. But I mean, that's true of plants too. It is. Because are natural plants toxic? Yes. As many as 70% of plants have toxins that are meant to keep you from eating it. Plants do not want us eating them. The plants we eat are plants that we have domesticated over eons to have lower levels of the toxins and higher levels of the sugars and fibers that we want. Keep in mind, like when we eat plants like chocolate and things that have caffeine in them, like coffee, if we have coffee and tea, chocolate, caffeine, the main drug that's in those three plants, it didn't evolve because it makes humans stay awake. It evolved because it kills bugs. Nature, there's always this idea that, oh, if you want to be well, get off your drugs and go out into nature and find yourself. No, if you go off your drugs and go out to nature, you'll most likely die because nature really wants to kill you. I mean, just some examples of things that are natural but not safe. Obvious ones: nicotine, cocaine, pot. Right? These are all, no, pot is safe, but nicotine, cocaine, these are obvious drugs that are bad for the body, perfectly natural. Amygdalin is it's actually a precursor to cyanide, and it's found in pit fruit stones. Yet a common supplement is apricot pits. And organic pesticides. Yes, sorry to tell you, organic food uses pesticides, no matter what they tell you. All conventional farming, all large-scale farming, conventional and organic, uses some kind of pesticide. And the distinction here is that organic farming uses organic pesticides. Well, guess what? Some of those are actually worse than the conventional pesticides we use. Things like neem oil, pyrethrins, and not used so much here in the US, but in other countries, rotenone. These are all things that can have major neurological and physiological effects, but perfectly fine and legal to use for organic farming. Get off my soapbox here for a second then. So let's get back to what we're talking about. So we've been talking about, we've got our holistic medicine, your standard of care and conventional medicine, but instead of just one specialized doctor, bring all the specialists in and integrate. So holistic is integrative conventional care. Then you've got alternative medicine, which is pretty much the exact opposite. Alternative medicine being medicines that are not considered standard of care, very often not considered conventional medicine in any way. And then you have CAM, which is another form of integrative medicine, but it's combining basically the first two. So it's conventional with alternative to try to get to wellness. So what does Western medical science say about all this? And so this is the part where I have to give my full disclosure. As a scientist, as a trained scientist, and a natural born skeptic, things generally my brain likes to, I like to keep an open mind, but when I start hearing things like naturopathy and alternative medicine, I tend to get turned off because so many times, I'm not saying there's nothing good there. I mean, there absolutely is, but there are way too many charlatans out there, and it's just sad that they've tainted that for everyone else. So when it comes to how often we see this, and a significant number of PD patients, nearly 40%, have reported that they use CAM, whether that be alternative medicines like herbs and acupuncture, or more conventional things that still aren't standard of care, like exercises, yoga, things like that. And many of these patients do report that they see either emotional or symptomatic relief, or some improvement in quality of life. And that's great. If it works for you, that's great. But from the science side, the scientific evidence supporting the efficacy of CAM is very insufficient. In most cases, like for a lot of herbals and exercises, it's non-existent. Now, when I say exercises, I mean some of the things like yoga. Now, that may help your mental state incredibly, and that's fine. But as far as treating the disease, we don't have the evidence that says it's actually doing anything for the disease progression. And the bottom line here, the thing that I always like to say is, if an alternative medicine worked reliably, we would call it medicine. And that's the point, is we need evidence. We need the science. We need the people treated. We need the backup to say, if you do this thing, it helps. And then we need to define what we're saying by help. So most Western medicine is targeted at treating the disease. And then when you add in the layer of holistic medicine, we're talking about Western medicine that's targeted at treating the person. When these other things are alternative, they're not standard of care, it's because we don't have the evidence to make them standard of care. We don't have the evidence that says it's treating the disease. We don't have the evidence that says it's actually treating the person. It's all anecdotal. And this is also the part where I want to say, I don't absolutely outright discount alternative medicine. Some natural and alternative remedies do appear to have some efficacy when held up to scientific scrutiny. Even more interesting is that some of them seem to work better when they are taken in this natural or alternative form. The example I gave earlier was St. John's wort. It does appear scientifically to have effects on mild depression. But what's really interesting about St. John's wort is it seems to work better when you're actually taking the supplement, like the dried whole plant of St. John's wort. In science and Western medicine, what we like to do is take that plant, try to purify out the active compounds and find which one is making you better. And we've done that repeatedly with St. John's wort. But what we're finding, interestingly enough, is that if you take any one of those drugs or combination of them in the lab and purify them, they don't seem to have the same effect as taking the whole plant. And we don't have an answer for that yet. But there is that to consider. But on the flip side, in support of my profession, other things do work much, much better when we go to this alternative natural remedy, take out the thing that is working from that natural remedy and purify it, concentrate it, or modify it. And obvious examples of this are aspirin. It's like, if you're having a headache or muscle ache, do you want to go find the nearest willow tree and chew on the bark? Or do you pop a bottle of aspirin so you can get that relief right away? Aspirin is what I'm going to go for. Same thing with L-Dopa. There are natural sources of L-Dopa, no question. And depending on the state of the disease someone has, or the type of disease they have, or how they need to take their medicine, some of these natural sources could help right along with dopamine availability. But we see the best efficacy with purified, dose regimented L-DOPA or Sinemet. So the question you have to ask when looking at these alternative medicines versus standard of care medicines is, do they work? And where do you look to find out that they work? And it's the science. It's the science, it's the science, and the science. And there are so many out there. Like, people have tried to study them, but then they stop here. They have, animal studies or cells in a dish, or at best case studies of people doing this. Now, this is bottom tier evidence. This is where you start. You have an idea, does it work? The evidence we want to see, the evidence we need to promote something to standard of care medicine, is we need the case control studies. We need the cohort studies, the actual clinical trials, and then multiple of those, multiple clinical trials. Then you do your reviews of all the results you've gotten from all the clinical trials. That point, then something can become clinical practice. Now, something being approved by the FDA does not automatically make it clinical practice. So it's kind of interesting to think that there are a lot of FDA approved things that are still considered alternative medicine simply because we don't know enough yet. But the FDA has deemed that they are safe enough to go into the clinic. So it's a hard road to travel to get to that clinical practice standard Western medicine level of care. And I'm not denying that. There's a lot of things out there that maybe should be up there, and we just don't have the evidence to promote it yet. But there are just way too many things out there where at best we have the bottom tier base level of evidence or nothing at all, especially for like a lot of more esoteric ancient traditional Chinese medicines or Indian medicines or traditional even European medicines. People are doing them just because they were being done years ago, and that doesn't necessarily mean it worked. Somebody ate an herb and their flu went away. Well, maybe the flu went away on its own, but because somebody observed that, now they always give the same herb for flu. And I want to stop and make a really good point here. This is all completely independent from homeopathy. So homeopathic medicine is a completely different beast. I could spend an entire day talking about that, but I can actually sum up homeopathic medicine in one word, and that is scam. There is no evidence that homeopathic medicine works. So I'm going to leave it at that. If you want to talk more about it, send the idea in. Today, we are actually talking about medicines. Now, why do we have such scant evidence for a lot of these alternative and CAM medicines? And part of the problem that we have so little evidence specifically for PD treatment in these alternative medicines. And I see your comment, how do we classify and define functional medicine? I didn't bring up functional medicine today. I think that's a better one to talk about with Amber. And so I think we should bring it up next time. So I'm gonna leave it there right now. I don't wanna muddy the waters too much today. And just focus on the alternative and holistic and CAM. But again, why do a lot of these alternative medicines and CAM therapies and holistic therapies not have much evidence? And the simple answer is because of the placebo effect we find in Parkinson's disease patients. It is a huge problem for studying efficacy in pretty much any drug, but especially a lot of these CAM therapies that don't fit into well-designed placebo control clinical trials. So, for example, studies have shown that people with Parkinson's experience a very strong placebo effect. Simply being told you're being given a drug dramatically improves symptoms and well-being without actually having any effect on the disease progression. And because we don't really have good methods of tracing disease progression while the person's alive. We have to base it on symptoms and self-reporting and well-being and quality of life. And that makes placebo control really, really hard when the placebo effect is almost the same as the medical effect. And what's really frustrating is we don't really know why the placebo effect is so strong in Parkinson's disease. And it probably has to do with the fact that we're already dealing with a deficient dopamine signaling system in the brain in patients with Parkinson's disease. And anything that improves mood is most likely to improve dopamine. And when that happens, that can improve a lot of the symptoms with Parkinson's disease. Again, the sad part is that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with disease progression. So this placebo effect tends to be a little bit more short-lived. Oh, the new biomarker SSA. That is also a whole other discussion. Amber has thoughts on that. My apologies. I think the biomarker SSA is going to be helpful for some therapies. The problem is SSA is very specific to synucleinopathies. So Parkinson's that involves alpha-synuclein, and not all people have synucleinopathies that have Parkinson's disease. Or may not have severe synucleinopathies until later stage Parkinson's disease. So there are pluses and minuses to the biomarker. In truth, it's not a new biomarker. They just came up with a better way to assay this biomarker rapidly, which is fantastic. Absolutely. I would argue it's not the biomarker we're looking for as the end all be all when it comes to studying some of these therapies. Will it elude the placebo effect? Absolutely. Because if you have the modified alpha-synuclein floating around, you can't fake that. It's there. And these are the kind of biomarkers we need to be able to effectively study these treatments. Time will tell how well SSA fits into the clinical trial scheme. For now, the reason we don't have a lot of these studies right now is because of this placebo effect. And again, some of these therapies just don't fit well into a blinded study. For example, how do you placebo control acupuncture? It's either they put pins in you or they didn't. And you're going to know whether they put pins in you or not. So how do we control for that? So we know that it's not just placebo effect. Really hard to do. So before I get into some examples of some of the alternative medicines that are pretty common, just some take-home points. One, something being natural or over-the-counter doesn't guarantee that it's safe. I do want to stress that. I know it sounds like I'm a broken record, but there's a reason the FDA exists. And it's to make sure this stuff is safe before we start putting it into people. Supplements don't have to do that. So just because you can go buy it doesn't mean it's safe for you. Especially when it comes to supplements and alternative remedies and herbals, there's a lot of variability in the preparations and their purity. They can have contaminants. Ayurvedic medicine from India is an excellent example of having contaminants. They tend to have a lot of heavy metal contaminants. And for a lot of these herbs and alternative remedies, we don't really have much knowledge on their actual effects on the body. Right? They're being given out of tradition. And some may actually have no efficacy studies at all. So when it comes to looking at these non-traditional medicines, judgment rests with the users. Look for evidence. Does it work? Is it safe? At the end of the day, if it works for you, fantastic. Just understand it may be the placebo effect. But if the evidence is there and it's working for you, I'm not saying don't try it, but I am saying go talk to your doctor. Always tell your physician all the drugs you're taking, whether they're prescribed or not, all the supplements and herbals you're taking, and if you are using or are considering using any CAM remedies. If you want to go see a holistic professional, if you want to go see a CAM professional, if you want to go see a naturopathic doctor, talk to your medical doctor first so that they can be on board with any changes. Always, because you don't know what effect something a naturopath or a alternative medicine person is going to give you is going to have with your prescription medications. Your physician is in a much better place to know that because they know your treatment and your history. So talk to them before starting any new drugs. So what are some examples of complementary alternative medicines and where do they stand? One that's becoming very popular and common is CBD oil, so cannabidiol. So CBD is one of the two main components of medical marijuana. The other one, of course, being THC, the part that gets you high. CBD does not cause the same high or numbness that you get from smoking straight up marijuana or taking THC. So it doesn't pose as strong a risk of dependence that marijuana or THC may have. And it's currently available as a supplement. But of course, again, because this isn't an FDA regulated thing, and there are still some states that lump CBD oil in with THC, so it's not okay. All the same problems with unknown purity, unknown concentration apply as they do with other supplements. We do have some evidence that there are anti-inflammatory and antioxidant benefits with CBD oil. But the only FDA recommended use, not FDA approved, but FDA recommended use, is for very pure forms of CBD for very certain types of pediatric seizures, where it does work very, very well. But again, with a lot of alternative medicines, in this case, simply because of legality over the years, the clinical trial evidence for supportive use for CBD and Parkinson's or anything else besides pediatric surgeries for that matter is very minimal. So where does it come with PD? So there are sellers, there are patients giving anecdotal evidence. There are people with PD that post videos online that, oh, I took 2 drops and all my symptoms went away. This is anecdotal evidence. Can you really trust everything you see on the internet? And of course, if they're trying to sell it to you, they're going to say whatever they can to sell it to you. This is not scientific evidence. And again, the clinical data is very minimal, but there are a few trials. They just tend to have very few patients. So there have been some open label studies, nothing with placebo effect in mind, but they have found some improvements on sleep and psychiatric mood, some motor scores. But again, none of these have a placebo effect. There was one double-blind study done, but it found no effect on movement symptoms. And we're just watching and waiting for the other trials as they move through. So without full clinical data, we don't know the full safety, we don't know the full efficacy. We don't know the full profile about CBD and its benefits for PD patients. So another user beware type thing here. Again, if you want to give it a try, it's out there. I'm not going to say yes or no because I can't. Go talk to your doctor. Acupuncture and PD. So this is another one, like I quoted earlier, as many as 40% of PD patients have said they've gone to try acupuncture. I mean, lots of people have tried acupuncture. A lot of people say it really helps their mood and makes them feel, and improved quality of life, improved mental state, on par with yoga or massage. And again, there's a reason it's been around this long. Keep in mind, though, acupuncture is just basically a more painful form of massage with a lot of interbody touching, interbody connection with somebody touching you. a lot of meditation because you're laying there in a very prone state for a long time. So in a way, you can kind of lump yoga and massage and acupuncture together as far as the type of mental relaxation they're trying to elicit. The question is, does acupuncture treat the disease? Can we call it a medicine? And that's the thing, is like again, anecdotal evidence suggests that people are reporting having improved symptoms after getting acupuncture. Interestingly enough, when it comes to acupuncture, and we look at animal models of disease, so animals that have been induced to have Parkinson's, some very rare and unfortunately not very well designed animal models have shown neuroprotection after acupuncture in these models. But on the larger whole, some of those studies aren't very well designed and the results vary quite a bit. And none of this is really translated to humans. The human studies with acupuncture suggest there are definitely positive effects with symptom alleviation, at least temporarily, with mood, with quality of life. But we don't have any evidence that they're slowing disease progression or turning it around. So that's where that one's at. Oh, sorry. Detox. There are a lot of naturopaths. This is a huge one for naturopaths and naturopathic doctors, is a detox diet or detox drink or detox shake to clean the toxins out of the body, and that's what will cure PD. And the idea is that you'll take these dietary or drink alternatives and get the harmful chemicals out of your body. Do a detox. Scam. Detoxes are scams. I'm just going to be flat out blunt about that. Despite the bold claims that a lot of these companies have, that a lot of these naturopaths have, there is little to no evidence that any form of drink that you take is going to eliminate toxins from the body specifically. In fact, the ones that actually do eliminate things from the body can be harmful, because when these drinks, which tend to have what we call chelating agents in them, things that sop up heavy metals and other minerals, they're not distinct. They're not only taking out, the lead and the magnesium, they're taking out the iron and B vitamins and trace minerals that we need to be healthy. So they can strip away necessary minerals. But at the end of the day, there's no evidence that these detoxes have any positive effect on the body, especially when it comes to a disease like Parkinson's disease. Because at the end of the day, if somebody tells you detox and you're an otherwise healthy person, they're just trying to sell you something, because we have all the detox we need. It's called our liver, our lungs, and our kidneys. Our body is designed to get rid of the stuff that damages it. And if those organs are functional, there are very few things that we can do to our body other than having a normal, healthy diet to hasten the body towards cleanliness. This idea that your body is a toxic dump and that's why you have a disease, that's honestly patient shaming to try to sell you a drink to clean yourself up. That's all it is. Now, if these organs aren't working, the detoxes aren't going to help you much, because the detoxes are still going to rely on your liver, lungs, and kidneys to get cleared from the body. So if your organs aren't working, don't turn to detoxes, go to your doctor, because you're going to need liver meds or blood dialysis or an organ transplant. And yeah, there I'm being a little facetious, because I do have strong opinions when it comes to detox regimens. Now, I am not talking about a healthy diet. Absolutely maintain a healthy diet. But I mean, when I say maintain a healthy diet, eat your fruits and veggies, drink lots of water, make sure those organs can do what they need to do to flush everything out. Just like you've been taught your whole life. Eat your oatmeal, eat your fiber, eat your fruits and veggies, meats, cheeses, carbs to a minimum, drink your water. Live healthy, get exercise. Treat your body well, and it'll do the detox job for you. And then we have Ayurvedic medicine. This is the ancient Indian medical system, also known as Ayurveda. And it's based on ancient writings from India that rely almost exclusively on natural and holistic approaches to body and mental health. The interesting thing about Ayurvedic medicines and Ayurveda is that these ancient writings may contain some of the earliest accounts of Parkinson's disease and how to treat it. Records going back 3,000 years describe patients with symptoms that we would today classify as Parkinsonian. And they remarkably had found treatments that were like these natural occurring beans and legumes in the area that had naturally occurring levels of L-DOPA. Give them to the patients to chew on and their symptoms would improve. Not a surprise. It's basically the same thing as giving Cinnamon, but it's also not as efficacious as giving Cinnamon, so giving the concentrated drug. But like supplements, and I mentioned this earlier, Ayurvedic medicine preparations often lack oversight because they're being prepared by a traditionally trained Ayurvedic professional, and I use the term professional very loosely there. Ayurvedic medicines that come into the US, they have no FDA oversight or approval. And actually, some of them have been identified by the FDA as having very high levels of very dangerous toxicants like lead. So unless, again, you know what you're doing, this one might be one to steer clear of a little bit. So where do we stand as we wrap up here? Again, some over-the-counter drugs, some supplements, some herbals may have benefits for Parkinson's disease or other symptoms you may be having beyond, and we're not just talking about your movement symptoms, for mental state and things like that. But the clinical evidence is scant for most, and for some, non-existent. When we're talking about these alternative medicines, particularly dietary supplements and herbals, stay on your guard because the actual contents should be considered suspect. When looking towards CAM, when looking towards holistic medicine, when looking towards alternative medicine, consider the risks and the benefits. Look to medical sources for information, talk to your doctor. Any new therapy, wanting to go see a holistic or naturopathic professional or a CAM professional, wanting to start some new alternative medicine, talk to your physician. Make sure that they are, one, aware of what you're doing, and two, see how on board they are and where the risks might be. So I did express some strong feelings today. I do want to point out, I am not a mad scientist when it comes to this stuff, but I am somewhat disappointed, especially when it comes to some of the charlatans, especially in the naturopathic field. That's what I have for today. So I want to address this last comment here from Donna. How do we evaluate a medicine like Irian's that has been approved in the US by the FDA for treatment of OFS, but has not been approved in Europe? Okay, so that brings up a whole nother issue of things that are approved here, not in Europe, things that are approved in Europe, not here. And a lot of that has to do with the differences in how these two regulating bodies approve things. Okay, so in the FDA, we approve medicines based on a benefit to risk ratio. So does the benefit outweigh the risk? Because we recognize, the FDA recognizes, and most scientists and medical professionals recognize, everything has risk. There's no such thing as the perfect drug that goes in and fixes flu but doesn't do anything else. There's no such thing as the thing that goes in and fixes cancer but doesn't do anything else. That's very obvious. But does it alleviate symptoms to the point that it improves quality of life despite the risks it might pose? Then yeah, the FDA gives it a chance and gives it approval if they can prove that the risks really are low enough and the benefit really is high enough. Europe is any risk, out the window. Like they're cautious to a fault. This is an example of, there are a lot of drugs, and part of this is because of what happened back in the 60s and 70s with the drug thalidomide. I don't know how many of you remember that. Thalidomide was created in the 60s, discovered in the 60s, marketed as a anti-nausea medication. And they did all these safety tests. It was discovered in Europe. It was marketed in Europe. They did all these safety tests, and one of their biggest markets turned out to be pregnant women and stopping their nausea, because there were no real good anti-nausea medications for pregnant women with severe nausea. So they, so Karen knows. So they started giving it everywhere. Then the company selling thalidomide really put pressure on the FDA to get this approved in the US, because look at this giant market we have in the US. We need a market in the US. Your patient's judgment. And people leaned hard on the FDA. Politicians, lobbyists leaned hard on the FDA. But honestly, it's one person of the FDA that was like, no, because you haven't done the right safety test. Because they had actually never done any safety test with pregnant women. And sure enough, she held out long enough that you started to see a lot of these children born with the unfortunate deformities caused with thalidomide. And so after that, European governing bodies got a lot more strict with what they approve. So if anything poses any level of risk that they deem unsafe, or contains any drug that they, or chemical that they have previously deemed unsafe, it's a no-go. And that's, there are some things that their evidence is suspect or a little too extreme. Getting away from drugs, one example is that people love to throw out is, glyphosate, Roundup, the pesticide. It's approved in the US, but not in Europe. So why is it approved here? Well, again, that's because of this risk-benefit thing and where they're getting their information from. The actual science says glyphosate is perfectly safe, but when a whole bunch of anecdotes make their way up to the top saying, oh, I got cancer, or, oh, we have these really bad animal studies where all the animals got tumors, the Europe's going to side with, oh, we don't want to take the risk. The FDA and USDA are going to look at all the evidence. They're going to see, oh, those studies were crap. This is mostly anecdotal. It's a really safe product, and give it its approval. So that was a really, really long discussion and explanation, simply to say there's a difference in how the two bodies judge risk benefit. Basically, if the FDA's approved it, it's okay to get started. Get it in the clinic. Is the FDA infallible? Of course not. And neither is the European Union. I mean, they've approved stuff that the FDA hasn't, and for the same reason. There are some drugs that work. For example, tuberculosis vaccine. Everywhere else in the world has an approved tuberculosis vaccine, except the US. And it boils down to the FDA doesn't want to give it approval, because then how do we test for tuberculosis? Because if you have the vaccine for tuberculosis, you'll always test positive for tuberculosis, but you'll have it. But again, that's an example of a really stupid reason something's approved one place but not another. Anyway, that's it. That's what I have for today. Do we have any other questions now that we've run past 1 o'clock?
That was outstanding, Victor. I really learned a lot. And, I always try to keep in mind too about if the natural path or whomever is making a lot of money off the supplements that they send you, that's a good reason to perhaps not take them.
Yeah, supplements, like the history behind, Broxel, and Broxel is a good one, Donna. But a little run out of time for today for sure. Yeah, the history behind supplements and why they're not regulated more than they are. It definitely gets my ire up. So that's definitely a buyer beware type thing. And it's a shame because there probably are some supplements that work. I mean, there's some supplements that are absolutely necessary. People that have vitamin B deficiencies, people that have severe vitamin D deficiencies, and people that have very severe mineral deficiencies, they should be taking those supplements. But if you're a otherwise healthy person eating a good Western diet or balanced diet, even an Eastern diet or Mediterranean diet, if you're eating a balanced diet and you're otherwise healthy, there's no reason to be taking those supplements. They're not doing any benefit to your body. And if you're taking some of the supplements and herbals that are meant to target a disease or disorder, like for example, for St. John's wort, it may have some efficacy, but there's so little accountability in the supplement system that we can't judge it effectively.
Right.
So I have to run to another meeting. I hope everyone had a fun time. Get those ideas to us, and we will see you next week. We'll bring up the idea of talking to functional medicine to Amber, and we will see you next month. Oh, we will not see you next month. We are canceled next month. We'll take our normal summer hiatus because of vacations and meetings and things like that. We will be, unfortunately, in California for a conference during May's meeting. Just so you guys know.
Okay, great. Hey, everybody, if tomorrow is supposed to be a rainy day, so if you're out and about anywhere near Robinson Town Center, please go there and participate in voting. They're having a strawberry pretzel salad contest where you have to kind of repurpose the ingredients of strawberry pretzel salad and vote on the best recipe. And we are partnering with a family who raises a lot of money for us. And they have a bakery up north. And they have made a strawberry pretzel cookie. And if you vote for us and we win, we get $500. So come out and try strawberry pretzel salad in every form. And if you haven't signed up for our Living Well conference, please do so. It's going to be such a great day, and tickets are going fast. So we don't want you to miss out.
I unfortunately will not be there, but Amber and the boys will be there. So be sure to find half the doctors Van Laar if you're there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to everybody. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Happy weekend, everybody.
See you, everyone.